there's no excuse for us having power outages, none whatsoever. We are resource rich. We're policy bankrupt, but we are resource rich. We have the resources to power the state. We have policies that won't allow us to do that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined by my co-host Amy Cooke. And this week, we're going to be going back to a fairly familiar topic because Xcel Energy is in the news again for its unreliable electricity. I know we sound like a broken record on this, but this stuff matters, and it's as evidenced by the increased media coverage it's getting. It's top of mind for folks. This is the real life stuff. What brought this to our attention this week is a new article in the Denver Post that surveys and interviews residents all over in Denver and then in some other communities in the metro area that have just been grappling with increased outages. One particular person said 13 times this year alone, which is insane if you think about it. We're a first world developed, the most developed country on earth, and we can't even keep the lights on in the core of our state. If you want to just kick us off a little bit on some of the takeaways from the article.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Jake, here we are, another week, another outage. To that point, we sound like a broken record. And to some extent, we are going to say we told you so. We started talking about that this was going to happen back in 2010. So but before we get into that, do you mind if I take a moment of personal privilege? I want to show our latest addition to the set. I was driving through West Virginia, and God bless West Virginia, where, by the way, they're going to make coal great again. It is a coal miner made out of coal. So if nothing else, when all the power goes out and it's freezing cold, we can burn them. But I bought it at one of those, welcome centers at the gift shop at the Welcome Center. I love this. You go into West Virginia in a welcome center in the gift shop, and they have a coal miner made out of coal. So he's going to join our set right next to Ready Kilowatt, where electricity, Ready Kilowatt, does so much, costs so little. That's how you know it's dated. Because,
if only.
Yeah. As we were talking before we started, Jake said, it should have an asterisk by.
Terms and conditions may apply.
So here we are talking about yet another power outage. And while we're laughing about it to some extent, just because we're doing this again, but it's really, the warning signs are there. I actually read a whole column about this. The warning signs on Colorado's policy, electricity policy, are there. This is what's going to happen. We're going to continue to see more of this. And in this particular case, it's a neighborhood. They interview a gentleman who has a business and is, I think, looking to build at South Broadway in Lincoln. And he was saying the electricity provided by Xcel Energy, the Denver Post is very clear about this. This is Xcel Energy. So it's been out 13 times this year, up from 7 times last year. It caught one. He's 12th. The guy who is McCustian, I think is his name, said he is $12,000 over budget for repairs and heating and cooling system in a building he manages on Broadway, and he sees outages as the primary culprit for it.
Yep.
And we've talked about that too. It isn't just inconvenient. And we've talked about it being life and death too, right? I mean, obviously, HICPUF knows that. They're giving batteries away to people on Medicare or Medicaid who need life-saving devices that require electricity. They're giving away batteries. So it's not just inconvenient. It's expensive. It costs people money. And it can be a matter of life and death. And the thing is with this, this is just another story about this. I was talking to somebody from Sterling Ranch who said the outages are far worse than even what is being portrayed. And they said they had that town hall meeting. They had a meeting. Xcel came. And you know what my question to them was? Did your state representatives show up?
Oh, that's a great question.
Were they there? And she said, no. You know what? Those are the people who should be there answering questions as to why we have these policies in place which are going to make our grid more unstable and drive up the cost of electricity. And she was saying that the outages, for instance, in Sterling Ranch are the same thing. Sometimes they last hours, sometimes they're days long. And of course, Xcel has a whole host of reasons why these outages are happening. But what we are ignoring is the elephant in the room, is that we have passed policies in the state that chase wind and solar, unreliable, intermittent sources. And I know it's at the expense, in some cases, of maintenance and just upgrades, which is why we've had the Fenberg rider,
Right.
so that we can have more money going into the distribution system. This was also predictable.
Yeah, they actually have a quote in this Post article from former PUC Commissioner John Gavin, which I completely agree with. It's funny enough, though, he voted for several of these policy priorities, but he makes a great point. Essentially, Xcel would much rather chase the capital expenditures of building wind and solar plants, and perhaps he accuses them of perhaps falling asleep on the job of doing the day-to-day maintenance of the grid that creates these reliability challenges. And that's sort of the point you're getting at, is our policy has been focused on Xcel, build wind and solar at all cost as soon as you can. And, it's unearthing a whole host of challenges with the grid. I highlighted a few of the things that they cite as causes for this, and bear with me because it's long. We see a fault in a cable, blown fuses, a line damaged by construction, bad weather, problems with conductors, repair and replacement of various equipment. They blame squirrels. I guess squirrels at several points have disrupted the grid. Xcel CEO Robert Kenney talked about historic load growth is presenting challenges on the grid as more and more people come here, as more and more people get electric vehicles or electric home heating, or if data centers come here, big industrial manufacturers, all that stuff contributes to more strain on a grid that is not being properly maintained. And I also want to go back to a point you raised, the first guy they profile in the piece, citing that unreliable electricity is essentially his number one concern with that project. This goes to a point we always make, that energy touches every single thing that we do. It impacts our economy. This is a guy that's trying to build 164 apartments in a high demand part of the city of Denver. That's something we should absolutely be encouraging. We have a housing crisis. We need more homes. And he's being held back by terrible electric service. So this is where energy policy really does matter.
Right. And you think about it. So you start adding all of these things up. So let's think about this. The power is unreliable. Xcel has already come in and said that they can't meet the state's climate goals by in the time frame laid out by the legislature at the cost of $12 billion. They can't meet that timeline at that price. We know that. They have the Fenberg rider, which, because they don't have, they need money to improve the distribution system, as we can see here. They also have this Pathways transmission line that's 550 miles long, that's $1.7 billion. And then the state says that wind and solar is the most expensive way to decarbonize the state, and that's at $61 billion. So throw hydrogen in there, and you need several $billion more just to audit the state's pipeline system. We are talking about real money and real unreliability. It will bankrupt the state. And this gentleman, to your point, has this incredible project he wants to build in Colorado, where, by the way, how much we heard about unaffordable,
Right.
We need affordable housing.
Yep.
We don't have enough housing. Guys trying to do it. Number one issue, reliable power. And that's going to be in homes. It's going to be in business. It's going to be in school. It's going to be everywhere.
And it's something that, they tease it a little bit in this article, but there's actually been a development since this was published that this is apparently going to lead to some sort of an investigation by the Public Utilities Commission. I'm not sure what exactly that's going to entail. They include a quote from a spokesperson at the PUC saying that we're committed to protecting utility consumers to receive safe and reliable power. To understand the situation, we recommend that the commission open an investigation. And apparently that's going to happen. We'll see how sincere they are in that. You made a great point before we started recording. Yeah. The quote kind of belies what their mission has been lately.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the mission of the PUC has been, if you remember, they changed their mission. It was back around 2008. And they said, instead of it being least cost, reliable power, it is affordable, reasonably priced, reasonably priced, consistent with the social, economic, and environmental values of the state. Safe was never in there. Yeah. And by the way, reliable. They just reasonably priced power. So I'm curious what safe power means.
Right.
We were laughing. Well, the safest power is no power, which is maybe that's where they're headed with it. But the fact that the PUC is opening an investigation into this, as you've just mentioned, the question is, what does that mean?
Right.
I don't know what that means.
I'm not sure either. Chances are it'll be something similar to what we saw the legislature do 2 years ago, where they just sort of dragged Xcel before them and asked them a bunch of questions. Why are you doing this? Why is it like this? The difference is the PUC does have more room to actually pull levers and make Xcel change its behavior in one way or another. That may very well mean more money coming from ratepayers to fund that stuff, because Xcel doesn't do this, out of the goodness of their hearts. They do things to make money. So we'll see what comes out of it. Obviously we'll stay on top of it because it's such a hot button issue. There's one other piece in this article that caught my attention as well, because it talked about the Denver City Council postponing a data center project in Globeville, which is one of the poorer areas of Denver. So this could have been an economic project opportunity in a lower income section of the city. And the city council members decided to postpone this project because they're concerned, quote, about the impact of water usage and the impact on the grid because I have power outages happening throughout my district already. So once again, turning away potential economic development because there's genuine concern that the grid can support it, even as it's currently constituted, let alone as we're getting further and further down the road to more unreliability.
And that brings up the point, that the guest that we had on last week, which Glenn Lyons. So if you're out there and you're thinking about a data center, check out consumer regulated electricity, because that self-generation or being able to develop projects independently and bring them online quickly. There is an interesting point too in this article that talks just about the grid. The country's aging electric grid is struggling to meet growth. Why? Because we have shut down. The other thing is we've shut down baseload coal, our little coal friend here. We've shut down baseload power plants, and we have built wind and solar, which, by the way, the grid that we built in the 60s and 70s isn't designed, 80s, I'd throw that in there too, isn't designed to handle intermittent weather-dependent sources. I mean, there's just more you have to do. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means there's more you have to do. So therefore, it's going to cost ratepayers a whole lot more. And I think we can look to, if you want to see what our future holds, look at California. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal. It was an op-ed from Alicia Finley, who wrote this. This headline could actually have Colorado in it. California's lights are out and Gavin Newsom isn't home. Customers across the state experience power outages, and climate policies are to blame. We talk about this all the time. There's no excuse for us having power outages, none whatsoever. We are resource rich. We're policy bankrupt, but we are resource rich. We have the resources to power the state. We have policies that won't allow us to do that.
Yeah, and yet misprioritization, myopic view of goals when you're failing at the basics, keeping the lights on, as evidenced by these folks saying that, no, this has increased over the last several years. It wasn't always like this. One last thing before we kind of wrap up and get to some takeaways is they have a section about restaurant owners being affected by this. This kind of calls back to an episode we did about a Boulder, or Niwot, I believe, Niwot market after the Xcel shut down power over there over concerns with wind. Just talking about what this means in practical terms, because, a lot of us know, you have an inconvenient power outage. Maybe you can't, charge your phone if it's only a couple hours. It's kind of a bummer. But for these folks, it's what feeds their families. And in this case, this person said that the power outages have occurred sometimes for days, sometimes even when it's just several hours. They have to follow health code guidelines, so they end up having to toss all of their product. They have to send their employees home, so those employees don't get paid. So it has economic ripple effects that, this stuff really matters, let alone the life and death stuff that you mentioned
think
earlier.
about that data center that they've put on hold.
Yeah.
You've got a guy who wants to develop housing in a city that is in desperate need of it. And he's saying his biggest issue is unreliable power. And then you have businesses saying, listen, sending people home, they don't get paid, or they're not going to be paid for that time. And then they're actually losing product. Yep. So to your point, it is an economic catastrophe waiting to happen, because these are smaller outages at this point. Yeah. When it is very large and it's a prolonged period of time and they're rationing power, that's going to look much different. And at the exact same time, the state of Colorado is asking you to put more and more of your devices onto the very grid that can't power us right now. Yeah. It doesn't work. None of this works. Can we tease your what we're calling?
Yeah, we can. I was just going to say, it was a great point you just made, and there's a reason we harp on this stuff so much. It's not, we don't enjoy just being curmudgeons saying things are bad. It's just reliability. It just freaking matters. It just absolutely matters. And someone has to be out there looking out for making sure, all this stuff that we depend on works properly.
And it should be our governor, and it should be our state legislators that make sure that we have the right policy in place so that we can power our state.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
But the thing you teased is, we were joking before we started recording that we ought to call just this general policy direction we're headed Project 2040, because I don't know what's more, everyone makes a big deal about a Project 2025 and how, it's insidious, and the shadow group is putting together this policy plan. Well, I don't know what's more insidious than allowing a state's electric grid to become more and more fragile and have more and more of your citizens experiencing blackouts.
It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
That's the sad thing. So yeah, I can't top that. I mean, that's it. We are Colorado's headed in the wrong direction. It doesn't mean we can't course correct, but we're headed in the wrong direction. And I'll plug my op-ed that I wrote. You can find it on Complete Colorado. And it essentially says Colorado is headed for an energy policy failure. And it goes through all the warning signs that are there. These are more of them. I mean, this story wasn't out when I wrote that column. Otherwise, I would have included it. But people in this state know, and there are people in positions of authority that know. But what they're not doing is stopping it or saying we need to change. We need to course correct. So I think you need to ask your legislators or your elected officials, where are they on this stuff? Yeah. Make sure they're showing up at your town halls. And if they're not, call them, ask them, find out why.
Yeah, and I will say it's getting harder for them to ignore it, because we talked about the CBS report a couple episodes back. We have the Denver Post articles, Colorado Public Radio did a piece on this. So it's getting attention. People are obviously pissed off, and we'll see if that amounts to any changes. Do you have any additional takeaways you want to leave?
Yeah, I do, actually. So one is hold your elected officials accountable. I can't say that enough. They're the ones who put us in this position. So that's one. Number two, look for more on Project 2040. The Polis plan is now Project 2040. And then three, I'm going to use Alicia Finley's own words. She was talking about California, but I'll use her words. A pragmatist would buy fossil fuel powered generators before they too are run out of the state. And she's talking about California, but she may as well be talking about Colorado.
I say it applies just as well here too.
Get your generator.
That does it for us for another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw, feel free to head on over to iitv.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you might get audio podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we're also open to show topic ideas, guest suggestions. We love hearing from our listeners. You can send those over at info@powergab.org. But until next time, we'll see you.